Good morning. So good morning, everyone, and welcome to the Sunday morning service here at the Unitarian Universalist Fellowship in Laguna Beach. We are so glad that you've all joined us for worship today. The land on which we join together in worship is the ancestral and unceded territory of the Ahashiman and the Tongva tribes. And we acknowledge these indigenous peoples as traditional land caretakers who, in the face of settler colonialism, continue to claim their place and act as stewards to protect their ancestral lands as they have for the past 8,000 years. We offer our gratitude to the people of the First Nations for their care of the earth and for their teachings. And with humility, we commit to learning and working on behalf of justice. My name is Pamela Floodman, and I will be serving as the worship associate this morning. Our Zoom and audiovisual texts today are Don West Jr. and Dara Skarecki, and they do amazing work. And our music will be led by Carol Cole, an essential part of our worship service. And we are so grateful for all of the members and the friends of this congregation, really all of you who make worship happen each week on Sunday mornings. So thank you to all of you. At UUFLB, we are a welcoming congregation with commitment to work together to actively dismantle systemic racism and oppression in all of its forms. Whoever you are, whomever you love, no matter your age or your gender, your ancestral or ethnic background, your life experiences, and really whatever has brought you here this morning, we welcome you to our community of mutual caring and serious intent to grow as spiritual and ethical beings, and to be part of a community which supports each of us as we work to make a difference in the world. In words that I took this weekend from the Leadership Council of the Unitarian Universalist Association of Congregations, and these were words that were written in October 2008, the Leadership Council wrote, "With humility and courage born of our history, we are called as Unitarian Universalists to build the beloved community where all souls are welcome as blessing and the human family lives whole and reconciled. Unitarian Universalists subscribe to no single religious creed, but have gathered a set of principles that guide us as we build a religious community together. And the principles that UU congregations affirm and promote are on the back of the order of service, and there is an order of service in the back of the sanctuary if you want to pick up a copy. And the list of principles does include the 8th principle, which this congregation recently last month did vote to include and affirm and promote, the 8th principle by which we are journeying towards spiritual wholeness, working to build a diverse, multicultural, beloved community by our actions that accountably dismantle racism and other oppressions in ourselves and our institutions." So please go ahead and take a copy of the order of the service if you wish. On a slide that Don will shortly put up for us is information about upcoming services here at UUFLB. So next week on March 17th, Don West Jr., who's a board member in the congregation, will be coming to lead a service. Don leads a service once a month here at UUFLB, and these are always wonderful services, so I hope many of you are able to join us. And then on March 24th, Haven Beck will be coming as part of our social justice series, and she is leading a service focused on the work that we can do and help others to do to face the trauma in our lives. On March 31st, we're very much looking forward to having Phyllis Hale, one of our I'm sorry, the name there is written as Phyllis Baya, but Phyllis is Phyllis Hale. And Phyllis is going to be leading a service on one of her favorite sources The Prophet, the book by Khalil Gibran. And then on April 3rd, Reverend Celia Young is returning for part of her ongoing series of services here with us at UUFLB. So I hope you're able to join us for many of these services. I also want to announce that tomorrow, on Monday, March 11th, we will be having the monthly board meeting, which is held by Zoom at 6 p.m. And you can see our board president, Oakley Frost, for further details. Also on Mondays every week, we hold a Zoom at noon discussion group, and Paul Bogdan is the wonderful host of this group. Thank you, Paul, for hosting and making that possible. Also next Sunday, March 17th, after the service that Dawn leads, we are going to be having a lunch and letter writing session, and we are going to be following up with our social justice work, particularly with relationship to finding ways to be supportive through letter writing for the individuals who have been incarcerated due to nonviolent drug offenses. And several months ago, Candace Hawes from OC Normal came and talked with us and gave us a really powerful talk about both the impact of legislation that led to the incarceration of these individuals and the real impact that even as a small community we can have by reaching out and making a connection. And so I'm very much looking forward to starting with our monthly lunch sessions also, including this way in which we can make a difference through our social action. Do we have other announcements? I know we do. Oakley Frost has an announcement, and Dara's bringing in the iPad so the folks on the
With the recent heavy rains, we've discovered that there's some leakage in the basement. And Paul indicates that we're unable to determine the source because we just have so much junk in the storage space down there that we can't even get in to inspect it or find out what the situation is. So this morning, following the service, Paul has volunteered, and Linda and I will be joining him and going down to the basement and going through and just trying to determine what it is that we need to save, and then the rest of it can be hauled to the junkyard. So if there's anybody who happens to be here this morning who's able and willing to spend a little time and help us out, your assistance would be very much appreciated. Welcome. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, great. Thank you very much, Oakley, for the announcement. Hopefully many of us can stay and give some help. Many hands to make light work for that important project. This morning, we are absolutely delighted to welcome back our guest speakers, Charles Langley and Nina Babiarz. I hope I'm pronouncing your last name. Nina Babiarz. Now I've got both the first name and the last name right? Excellent. Charles Langley and Nina Babiarz of Public Watchdogs. And Charles and Nina have visited several times here at UUFLB, and they've returned to give us an update on the important work that is being done to raise awareness about the nuclear waste problem at San Onofre and to work for solutions. I really enjoyed the summary that went out in the e-blast, and I'm not sure if Nina and Charles wrote it or if Kendra did, but in describing the service, the announcement said, "We can't keep kicking the canisters down the road." And while Southern California Edison claims low risk for the 3.6 million pounds of radioactive nuclear waste buried near an earthquake fault and in a tsunami inundation zone here in Southern California, there really is good reason to worry about its safety. In addition to the tremendous potential threat to human health and the environment, a spill would most likely shut down the freeway and the trains that run right next to the plant. A disaster at San Onofre really would be widely felt, and its effects would remain with us for generations. So our speakers today, Nina and Charles, represent Public Watchdogs, which is a 501c nonprofit dedicated to investigating corruption and malfeasance in government and law enforcement. So today, again, we are very grateful that Charles and Nina have joined us here at UUFLB to update us on the important work Public Watchdogs is doing to keep pressure on SoCal Edison and the government to find a better way to take out the nuclear trash. This morning, our gathering music was Nina Cried Power, and it's written by Hosier. The recording that you heard also featured Mavis Staples, a singer and a social action advocate over many decades. And I know I've shared this music once before here at UUFLB, but when I was planning for today's service, this is the music that came to mind. The music has a focus on the power that really we all have as individuals to make a difference. And the lyrics always move me and make me think. Part of them read, "It's not the waking, it's the rising. It's the grounding of a foot uncompromising. It's the heat that drives the light. It's the fire it ignites. It's not the waking, it's the rising." And then he continues with Nina Cried Power. And the images in the video capture reactions, which you saw in real time, of people listening to the music. And those aren't just random people. They're many of the social justice activists who have worked to use their power to make a difference. And again, I love the encouragement that we can use our power to work for justice. So thank you, Charles and Nina, for being here today at UUFLB, for inspiring us and keeping us informed, and for all the work that you do to make sure we have both access to information but also opportunities as a community to make a difference. Each Sunday, anywhere there is a service held in a Unitarian Universalist congregation, a chalice is lit. The flaming chalice is the symbol of our faith. So if you have joined us this morning by Zoom, I invite you, if you wish, to light a chalice within your home while I light the chalice here at UUFLB. Our chalice lighting words this morning were written by Lois Van Leer, a UU minister who retired in 2021 and has since been serving as Minister Emerita in Eugene, Oregon. We light this chalice not because we must, but because we may. We light this chalice not because we have the truth, but because we each come bearing and seeking many truths. We light this chalice in connection across culture, distance, class, and language. We light this chalice that our religion may be a beacon of light, hope, and justice. We light this chalice to kindle our hearts and our minds. It is such a joy for us to have guests on Sunday mornings, so if you are here for the first or second time, we'd love to get to know you. If you're comfortable doing so and are visiting for the first or second time, would you please stand and you could share with us your name, where you are from, and maybe briefly what brings you to visit our church today. Do we have any guests who'd like to introduce themselves? And do we have any guests on Zoom today who would like to introduce themselves? Okay, well, we're now going to celebrate the birthdays in March, And I know there are at least several birthdays in March for folks here in the building, possibly on Zoom as well. Is there anyone with a birthday on March who'd like to identify, stand up? So we have Colt, Paul, Dara. Brian isn't standing up, but Rachel's making him. So we have many March birthdays. Let's let our pianist take a photo, and then we will sing happy birthday.
Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, dear Colin, Paul, and Brian. Happy birthday to you.
Now we'll take just a moment to turn to our neighbors for a quick greeting and to offer personal welcome to old and to new friends.
A quick hello to you, Carolyn, and a hello again, Jean.
Hi, Dawn. Hi, Jean.
There, both of you.
How are you doing, Jean?
I'm doing okay.
Good, good. Okay. And Dawn, you'll be out next week, huh?
Yeah, I'm gonna be there in Laguna, yes, ma'am.
Yep.
Thank you all. Thank you all for being here and for joining us at UUFLB this morning. I know there are probably more conversations to be had, so we hope that everyone has a few minutes to stay and enjoy coffee and conversation after the service. And if you're visiting us this morning, please let us know if you would like to be added to our email mailing list so that you can receive advance notice of each service and other events. Our opening hymn this morning is number 123, Spirit of Life. We will be singing this favorite hymn for this congregation in both English and Spanish, and the words will be on the screens. So please, if you wish, stand as you are comfortable in body, mind, or spirit, and join our talented music director, Carol Cole, in singing.
Spirit of life, come unto me. Sing in my heart all the stirrings of compassion. Blow in the wind, rise in the sea, move in the hand, giving life the shape of justice. Roots hold me close, wings set me free. Spirit of life, come to me, come to me. Fuente d'amor, ven hacia mí. Il corazón cántele tu compasión. So blind
majesty, la de la vida. Abracame, líbrame, fuente de amor, ven a mí, ven a mí.
Let us take a moment to remind ourselves why we come together as a community. I invite you to read the words of our unison affirmation together when and if it feels right for you. And if you've joined us by Zoom, go ahead and unmute your microphone if you wish, so that your voices can also be joined together with the voices here in the fellowship building. Please join me in reading. Love
Love is the spirit of this
This
fellowship,
fellowship.
and service is its law. This is our
This is
great
our
covenant,
great covenant.
to dwell together in
Together in
peace,
peace.
to seek
To
the
seek
truth
the
in
truth
love,
in love,
and to help one
to help
another.
one another.
So thank you all for joining us today, being part of this community and committing to make a difference. We have come now to a time in our service to briefly share the important events that have touched our lives in the past week. These may be the joys which we're looking to share with each other so that they can extend beyond ourselves and share it in the community. And also to share our sorrows, because that gives us that important opportunity to provide support for each other and to provide the care that's vital for all of us. So during this time of sharing our joys and our concerns, we will pause the recording of the service. It is as much a blessing to be able to give as it is to receive, and in this self-governing, self-sustaining community, we recognize that it's our responsibility to do both, and to do both well. So during this time of offering, we will be passing a basket within the fellowship, and there will be information on your screen which provides additional ways in which you can give, either electronically or by sending a check to the fellowship. We recognize that we are empowered by all the gifts of our members and friends, all who join in covenant with us, both your time, your volunteer work, and your financial contribution. And all of these gifts are needed for this fellowship and for its continued good work in the world. Please join us now as we sing to each other words of sincere gratitude. From you I receive, to you I give. Together we share, and from this we live.
From you I receive, to you I give. Together we share, and from this we live. From you I receive, to you I give. Together we share, and from this
Now, please settle yourself comfortably. You may want to close your eyes. Let your hands and your body rest. Breathe in and out. In and out. Feel your shoulders relax as you breathe in and out. Please join me in a short time of silent meditation. I am so happy to have the honor of inviting our guest speakers, Charles Langley and Nina Babiarz, to come up at this time. I know they've prepared a presentation for us that's going to be informative, hopefully inspiring for the work we can do. Charles and Nina are also made good use of their travel. Come ahead. Made use of their good travel to come up here from San Diego today. They'll also be speaking with another group in Laguna Beach this afternoon after our service. And so we are also fortunate that as they finish their presentation today, they're willing to take questions from the group if there's further discussion. And because they're booked to move on to that next session, what we'll do is before closing the service out, if there are questions from the attendees here today, they've agreed to stay and answer a few questions before we close the service this morning. So welcome, Charles and Nina. Thank you for being here, and we look forward to hearing all that you have to tell us.
Thank you, Pam. Thank you. Well, where do we start? If you could pull up our first slides.
Okay, next slide, please.
We have a brief overview because we've been here a couple of times, so next slide, please. And Charles, want to?
We like to remind people that San Onofre was closed because of a radiation leak outside of the perimeter of the area. And that leak occurred because they purchased equipment that wasn't properly licensed or approved by the Nuclear Regulatory Commission. So it was the experimental nuclear steam generators that they thought would make them a lot of money, and they broke down right away and started leaking steam. Do you want to?
Well, those generators were supposed to last another 40 years, and they only lasted 11 months. You can see on our website that their own vice president of engineering warned the designers that if they, what they ended up doing was putting more tubes to generate more electricity, of course, more money, and those tubes basically rubbed together and gave us a radiation leak. So everything that we're dealing with now is totally unanticipated. Because as soon as the plant was shut down, of course, then they were confronted with what to do with the radioactive nuclear waste. We've got 3.6 million pounds of radioactive nuclear waste buried in 73 silos, 108 feet from the Pacific Ocean, when of course was accelerated sea level rise, on an earthquake fault, in a tsunami inundation zone. And I don't ever want to forget the fact that it's in the middle of millions of people.
Okay, next slide, please. So these domes are going to disappear. They're pretty iconic, and they're going to start removing them in the next few years. They've already done a lot of demolition. Next slide, please. I don't know if you can see this, but these are the silos that actually hold the giant canisters of nuclear waste, which the nuclear waste isn't a liquid. It's a very heavy metals, uranium, plutonium, in little pellets, and they're bundled up into rods, and together they make a fuel assembly that's about 1.5 times as tall as I am and about this big around. And these canisters, when they get them filled, weigh 100,000 pounds. And these are the containers that hold the canisters. It shows partial construction. Next slide.
I just want to point out, though, that you can't ever see this from the road. I mean, you can see the domes from the road, but even if you were to go down to the road that goes down to the campsite and Old Man's Beach, you can't get this view. It's really hidden from the public, and you can see the proximity to the ocean. So there's some more slides we have that'll show what happened to that recent storm of January 22nd.
Okay,
Next
next
slide.
slide. It's part of the demolition. Next slide. Okay, this is a pretty good illustration of how 2 near-miss accidents happened. That thing in the lower part image in the lower screen is a vertical cask transport machine. So it's lifting that heavy 100,000-pound cask, and it's inside a lead and water-lined sleeve to prevent the radiation from escaping. This radiation is, the plutonium alone is deadly for 25,000 years. It has 10 half-lives, which means there's actually 250,000 years until you get the total decay, and it's, not harmful.
I just want to focus a little bit on these accidents that occurred in 2018. First of all, they had an accident in July of 2018 that Edison never reported to the Nuclear Regulatory Commission. And had they done that, it could have prevented the second accident that occurred on August the 3rd. What was a very interesting observation in human behavior is that the chief nuclear officer came into a public meeting, the community engagement panel meeting that Edison runs, and he stated that they shut San Onofre down for maintenance to give his guys a break. And that's not what happened at all. Fortunately, we had a gentleman that stepped up to the microphone at the end of that meeting and had the courage to tell the truth of what really happened. And as Charles was just indicating, this radioactive nuclear waste is so radioactive that the folks that were putting this in the silos were doing that from a distance to protect themselves from the radiation. So they really couldn't see the downloading process. And what ended up happening is one of these cans that Charles described got caught on a 1/4-inch flange. And it wasn't until they took a radiation reading that they were able to realize that the can had never gone down to the very bottom, that it was hung up. And they call it a near miss because that's something, had it just dropped hundreds of thousands of pounds of radioactive nuclear fuel, 18 feet, it's something that could have taken out Southern California. Yeah. And so we're really grateful for the public advocacy of this whistleblower, because when he stepped up to the microphone, he said, I'll probably lose my job tomorrow, but I promised my daughter I'd tell the truth tonight. And so we're eternally grateful for him.
And this stuff is hot. You know, you could fry a steak on the side of one of those cans, and some of these fuel assemblies are well over 1,000 degrees in temperature in Fahrenheit. Next slide, please.
And this is the whistleblower, David Fritsch, that stepped up, and you could have heard a pin drop in that meeting, I can tell you that. And again, we wouldn't have known half of what was revealed had we not known the truth of why they shut San Onofre down. They shut it down for 11 months. Public Watchdogs, along with San Clemente Green and others, we got on the phone calling the Nuclear Regulatory Commission and said, you got to get out here. You know, we've had, well, they only heard about one accident, but, you know, we heard scuttlebutt that there was a second accident. And it took them 6 weeks to come out here, but they held a special investigation, and that lasted 11 months. And then they had another month of starting things up so that they could come into compliance with all the violations of federal laws that had been passed to protect the public safety.
I'd like to add, they didn't inspect any of the nuclear waste or the canisters or the equipment. They inspected the process, which is not really the problem. The problem with the Nuclear Regulatory Commission is it's responsible for promoting the industry and regulating the industry at the same time. So you know, if you know anything about psychology, that creates a neurosis when you've got an irresolvable conflict, and that's the conflict with the NRC, and it's why we have bad regulation.
And we also have a lot of state agencies that are involved. The California Coastal Commission that's granted Edison permits to do the decommissioning and also the demolition. But the California State Lands Commission was in the process of holding public comment for the final environmental impact report of what we're talking about, and when we had these accidents. And so Public Watchdogs, along with other advocacy groups, urged the State Lands Commission to, you know, stop the public comment period so that these accidents could be incorporated into that final environmental impact report. They didn't really do that. What they did was they revised that environmental impact report about 7-8 months later. They gave 2 weeks of public input comment period, of which nobody was notified of. And that's all that Edison needed to take to the Coastal Commission with a certified environmental impact report for them to get the next permit to do the demolition. So, you know, it's not just the federal agencies we're watching, it's every state agency that's involved in the process of this progression.
Yeah, and the state can't regulate radiation. Only the NRC can do that at the federal level. Next slide, please. So we have multiple federal court filings.
Next slide, please. We've filed 3 federal lawsuits, and I'm not an attorney, neither is Charles, but it's certainly been a learning experience. And of those 3 federal lawsuits, the first one was a congressional act of Congress that indicated back in, I think, 1963, that that land could be used for only one purpose, and that one purpose was for a nuclear generating plant. It was never intended to be a nuclear waste dump, which is what we've got now. And so I just want to point out that of the 3 federal cases, 2 of those we took to the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeal, and which is the highest you can go in the state of California, and one of those to the U.S. Supreme Court in 2021. And if you could describe the surprise of Edison and the Nuclear Regulatory Commission when the Supreme Court told him to acknowledge.
Oh yeah, the Edison was so arrogant, they didn't even file a reply to our court filing, and the court signaled that it was going to give us an initial review, which is a big deal because there's 10 to 15,000 cases that are before the Supreme Court where people are requesting a hearing. And we basically made it into the final round. They forced Edison to provide a good response, and then they opted to not hear the case, which is what happens to most Supreme Court cases. I didn't know that, but we're quite proud of the fact that we were able to marshal the resources and the attorneys and get it that high up the legal ladder.
And it was thrilling to see that the U.S. Supreme Court told them, hey, you've got to acknowledge Public Watchdogs filing, which we did in May of 2021. And, they were so arrogant that they didn't think they even had to respond. So the Supreme Court insisted that they did, and also set a deadline for them by September of 2021. And they had to get 2 extensions in order to comply with that. So, it was good to know that the Supreme Court held their feet to the fire.
Okay, next slide. So another venue of complaint we have is to the NRC, the Nuclear Regulatory Commission, directly with a 2.206 petition to revoke. And 2.206 is the part of federal law that allows us to file these revocation requests. And our concern is what happens if this facility gets flooded. These canisters are 5/8 inch thick stainless steel, which is pretty sturdy stuff, but by international standards, those are very lightweight containers. Most first world countries use casks to store, and the casks usually have walls that are at least this thick, and it's layers of lead and epoxy and all sorts of stuff. But with San Onofre, it's just a big stainless steel can, structured much like a beer can, with really thick metal on the top and the bottom. So our concern was water would go in there, it'd hit these hot canisters and actually potentially shoot steam into the environment, which could bring radiation outside the facility.
And also, I want to point out that the major concern about flooding, even if it's just accelerated sea level rise in water, that if that cannot be pumped out in a very short period of time, I think it's 32 hours, the cooling system of the radioactive nuclear waste can shut down. And then, of course, with tsunami, if anybody's watched not only what goes in on a tsunami, but what goes out. And that doesn't, that's not clear seawater. I mean, that's a lot of muck. And of course, if the cooling system is shut down, then we've got a crisis on our hands. And the NRC responded to Charles's filing of the 2.206 that it was quote unquote non-credible. Well, I looked through all their acronyms and all their phrases, and I didn't see anything that said non-credible. So we asked them to define that, and they couldn't do it. So, it's just been an interesting observation of
So basically, it's like we don't really have an argument against what you're concerned about. We've just decided that it's not credible.
Next slide, please.
Yeah. And
so where are we now? And the most important thing that everybody has to realize is that where we are now is we've got 3.6 million pounds of radioactive nuclear waste buried 108 feet from the Pacific Ocean on an earthquake fault in a tsunami inundation zone. And what we also know now is that all the cans, all 73 cans, were scratched and gouged in the downloading process. And you can see the photographs we're going to show you of those gouges and the corrosion that was caused by the gouges. But we've recently discovered, we've been following this since October of 2019, every step of the way, because Edison was required by the Coastal Commission to have an independent third party come in and have an inspection and maintenance program. And the first thing that independent report recommended was that Edison is using, and I'm quoting, an inappropriate, inaccurate calculation method to measure the depth of the gouge damage. And why are they doing that? They're doing that because by using that method, they're underestimating and under-predicting the depth of the damage.
Yeah, and what's so important about this is every canister on the way down got scratched or gouged, and that process of gouging creates a divot in the stainless steel, and it doesn't rust, but it is vulnerable to something called chloride-induced stress corrosion cracking. And I think we've got some pictures of that on the next screen.
Yes.
If we could go one more slide.
Oh,
And-
that's a picture of the, in order, if we were ever to be able to get this waste out of San Onofre, it would have to be transported by rail. And I think everybody in this room probably knows what our rail line is in trouble. Not just with the collapse of the bluff at Casa Romantica and the other area, but even last week they've identified 6 other areas on that rail line. Well, there's not a rail line that goes east if they're trying to take this out by the south rail line. And we've got bluff collapse down in Del Mar as well.
So realistically, they're going to have to move that waste before there's a place to store it. And the problem is if it's got these hairline cracks that are caused by stress corrosion cracking, and they're pulling a 100,000-pound can out of the ground with hairline fractures, it could create a real nasty mess.
Well, even the Coastal Commission has admitted that if they got gouged on the way down, they're going to get gouged in the uploading process. And the reason that the stress corrosion cracking is so important is because then you're talking about those thin-walled canisters, only 5/8 inch thick, that are now gouged, scratched, and corroding, leaking. And so a lot of what we're doing is for future generations. And, and one of the things that concerns me, there are many times that we've done FOIA requests and we get back, 6 or 8 pages from the Nuclear Regulatory Commission that are completely black. Well, what if 40, 50 years from now, these cans are leaching radioactive into the water table, into the water line, the soil, et cetera? If there's something that needs to be mitigated in a crisis like that, is the technical information going to be available to future generations to clean up such a mess?
10,000 generations from now. So our time, we've actually used our 20 minutes now.
Wow, it goes fast, but there's more to tell. We have an enormous amount of information on our website. Everything that we have done has been documented, and you can see that by clicking on the hyperlinks. It'll take you straight to the documents that we're talking about. I just want to remind everybody, and I almost interjected on the sorrow part of the ceremony, that tomorrow is the 13th anniversary of Fukushima. And we had a ceremony on the 10th anniversary. And there was not one national or local news that ever even covered it. And we've got the anniversary of Chernobyl coming up, as well as 3 Mile Island. And so, Edison is minimizing every risk. And our concern with that is in minimizing and not acknowledging the risk. We're unprepared. And we're demanding that at least we be better prepared. In addition to what we're talking about, I'm on Congressman Levin's task force, and I just worked with Admiral Herring, who's one of the co-chairs, to point out that we've got a situation of San Onofre on a military installation. And of course, we've got drones across the world that are doing damage. And so, we've got a target in the middle of a civilian population.
Well, under the rules of war, it's an acceptable target because it's on a military installation. So
We welcome you to get to our website and take a look at some of the other work that we've done. And if you can afford to donate, we'd greatly appreciate it. Thank you so much.
thank you.
I don't have enough handouts, but we're going to post these to our website. This is not just a little local problem. These are all they're bearing this stuff on site everywhere in the country where nuclear power plants are decommissioning. They have nowhere to put it. And so this radioactive waste is going in every community that's on this map. And this is the map of, in addition to that, all the nuclear power plants that haven't decommissioned yet. So, you know, this is something that is just critically important to every community to have this kind of radioactive waste buried on site in our communities. It's a disgrace, and we can do better. Thank you, Pam. Thank you.
So do we have time for questions, or?
We have time for a couple
Okay.
questions if there are.
So you want to have, you, sir?
Okay, so what can we do as members of the public? I mean, this sounds like, first of all, it sounds like there's nothing that Edison can really do.
Yeah.
Well, you know,
Okay, the question is, what can we do as members of the public, Nina?
well, I think tell everybody that you know what you've heard this morning and what you can see on our website, because most people don't even know the plant was closed due to a radiation leak. And of course, what we're talking about is just hitting the high notes. There's a backstory to every high note that we talked about. So, you know, the public awareness is what we're going for, because if the public was aware of how bad this situation is, we'd have people demanding better.
In the back?
I was wondering, you mentioned that those very thin canisters, 5/8 of an inch, and that in other countries, they go with lead, other, you know, much thicker.
Yeah.
How about the other facilities, nuclear facilities within the United States?
And we only know of one facility that has the exact same cans, Holtec thin wall cans in the middle of Illinois. You know, we've got these plants that are decommissioning. On the Hudson River, they're putting the diluted radiation water right in the Hudson River. At Pilgrim in Boston, the fishing industry and the tourism industry lost out. They're dumping it there too.
So the question was, where are they putting other nuclear waste and where can it go? And we urgently need a national nuclear waste repository. There was one that was going to be put in place in Yucca Mountain in Nevada, which is a very barren, relatively safe place to store this stuff, but it got killed by Harry Reid. And I'm not trying to be political or anything, but nobody wants this stuff. There's, you know, and their state never had any nuclear waste anyway, so they think it's unfair.
Yes, ma'am.
Am I correct in understanding that Southern California, well, it's called a public utility, is actually a private company?
It is.
Down in Northern California. So I would suggest that in your, I haven't been to your website, which I'm going to look at, because I've been aware of this problem for some time, that you put some faces of the shareholders and the board of directors, the people who are really, really making money off of this and have no concern or interest in the general public. Because I think we need to see, and people on the Nuclear Regulatory Commission too, I want to know who are these people that are profiting from this, and how can we pressure them? Because behind all these committees, there are always people. And people are, as you suggest, we're very vulnerable. Those people are vulnerable.
So the question is why don't we publish the photographs of the culprits? Is that, that's an idea. It's, yeah.
It's a suggestion, it's not, I'm not questioning.
Yeah,
I'm congratulating what you're doing.
thank you. We'd love to hold them responsible, and, you know, people hide behind corporations, but it's people who ultimately make the decision to break laws. And what's odd is the corporation becomes a criminal, but the executive who decides what the corporation does is usually inoculated. And it's extremely frustrating, because as soon as the Nuclear Regulatory Commission starts putting nuclear executives in jail for violating their laws, federal law, they'll stop, probably.
I just want to bring up something. Charles had a meeting on September 7th of last year. And the reason I'm bringing that up is because when we had these accidents, and they had violations of federal law, they had civil penalties, et cetera, One of them was that they didn't have the right equipment on site, they didn't have the personnel trained on the right equipment, and that's why those accidents happened. Some of those guys had never been trained to ever do that. We're doing it for the very first time. That's inexcusable. What happened in September of last year when Charles was bringing, down at San Onofre with the Edison officials that you're talking about, here they are. They don't have the equipment on site for flooding that he was bringing to their attention. They don't have the personnel trained, you know. So the bad behavior continues, and the Nuclear Regulatory Commission is regulating by exemption. They're not regulating any longer by the federal laws that were passed to protect the public safety. They're just simply not doing it.
Yeah, I asked them, where are you going to get a vertical cask transporter, that huge piece of equipment we showed? And they said, we're going to rent it. So, you know, like, hello, U-Haul? You got any nuclear waste equipment on hand?
And not only that, but when we're talking about a tsunami, there's a good chance they can't even get personnel down there, you know? So, I mean, they're continuing, that's their culture, and you hit the nail on the head. That is the culture of what we're dealing with. Thank you, Pam. Thank you. Sorry about that. I'm going to leave some of our business cards, and we're going to post these maps on our website, so take another look at very personal to every community that's on it.
Nina and Charles, thank you so much for being here. And there'll be more information on their website. And thank you, everyone, also for your attention and your questions. And definitely we need to be working on this work together. We will now join together in our closing hymn, number 1074, Turn the World Around. Please stand as you are comfortable.
We come from the fire, to the fire, turn the world around. Come the water, living on the water, go back to the water, turn the world around. We come from the mountain, living on the mountain, go back to the mountain, turn the world around. Ooh, so is life, ah, so is life. Ooh, so is life, ah, so is life. Do you know who I am? I know who you are. See we one another clearly. Do we know who we are? Ooh, so is life. Oh, so is life. Ooh, so is life. Oh, so is life. Water make the river, river wash the mountain, fire make the sunlight, turn the world around. Heart is of the river, body is the mountain, spirit is the sunlight, turn the world around. The spirit, truly of spirit, only can the spirit turn the world around. Ooh, so is life, so is life. Ooh, so is life. Ooh, so is life.
Now is the time for us to extinguish the chalice here at UUFLB and within our homes. We extinguish the flame, but we keep its light in our hearts. with its message of love and justice, taking it outside these walls to the world we live in until we are together again. So now please join in our closing song, Let There Be Peace on Earth.
Let there be peace on earth, and let it begin with me. Let there be peace on earth, the peace that was meant to be. With earth as our mother, we are family. Let us walk with each other.
If it hadn't been for one simple thing.
Let peace begin with me. Let this be